Good day, junior techies. Today we're going to take a look at some of the common language errors that creep into our writing and grammar. Now, pay close attention to this lesson because you can use this information to both improve your creative writing and your language mark. Here we go. Now let's deal with the first one here. It's a split infinitive. Now, what the fudge is that? Let's have a look. The infinitive verb is a non-finite verb, as all of you should know by this stage, and it is used to add detail to a sentence. It is a combination of a finite verb, something that you can see the action of sometimes, like run or play or sing, and there we can hear the action. And we add the little word to in the mix, and so it sounds like to run, to play, to sing. Now, when you place a word in between those two, between the to and the finite verb, it is an error. So don't squish in an adverb or an adjective or anything else that can cause the verb to split. And yes, there's where the word comes in, the split infinitive. So what we often do is we love asking this grammatical error in our language papers, but we also flag it when it comes to your writing. So please ensure that you do not commit this error in your writing. Now, part of learning English is that you have to be able to notice your errors and, of course, correct them. This is part of the editing process, and it is also on your marking rubric that we use to afford you marks. So pay careful attention. First, you must show how you've identified the split infinitive. I'm going to do that for you today so that you can see. Remember that you can have different functions in a sentence for a word, but the rule is that they must never split the infinitive. So we can have it to somewhere else that's a different part of speech, or we can have a finite verb that's just a finite verb. But as soon as they stand together or they are the same thing, then any word in between is that split. Right, that is why it is considered an error and why in both your writing and your language papers you should avoid this at all cost. Now, let's look at the following sentence. Tandeka played her flute to entertain the class. Right, now let's have a look at the actual sentence. The word played is my main verb. It is the finite verb. If I just say Tandeka played her flute, makes complete sense, right? So that is not my primary verb. Now we move over to entertain. And you'll notice that it has a different function here, to entertain, right? The entertain can still be a finite verb, but there's no split here. Let's look at the next one. This holiday is a great time to go to the beach. Now what do we notice here? The finite verb or the linking verb is, because the linking verb's job is to link a noun to a noun or a noun to an adjective. And here, of course, its function here is to be an adjective here. Then she only talks. She only wants to talk to her friend. Interesting. We ordered sushi to share. Once again, do you see different functions here? To talk there could be a verb, a noun, and ordered is definitely an adverb. To share there. Right, the rain ruined my plan to tend the garden. Here, it's of course an adjective, and it tells us more about the plan. So be careful when working with these, when you're identifying them as your parts of speech. As you can see, they have different functions. So of course, you would have to identify them differently. Now have a look at the underlined words. Those are all the infinitives. How do I know? Well, I first looked to see if I could find the finite verb. Notice that those are the ones in green writing and they are highlighted in yellow. Now, when we look at any non-finite verbs, in this case the infinitive, I need to check to see if I've squished something in between. In the next slide, I'll show you what a split infinitive looks like, but this slide is how they would look correctly in a sentence or be written correctly. Now you see the difference here. It's very clear. I've indicated in red highlight the incorrect sentence or the incorrect use of the infinitive. You may not place any descriptive word between the to and the entertain here, for example, in the Tandeka sentence. Each time here, I've purposefully split the infinitive. Now I know you're going to say something like, oh, but ma'am, we speak that way. Of course we do, but that doesn't mean that it's correct. And very often that's where we make our mistake as home language speakers, as well as someone that's not a home language speaker. It sounds correct because we hear it all over the place, but that doesn't mean it is grammatically correct. So now that you have seen how to identify it, you'll either have to move the added word to another place in the sentence or remove it completely. It is very important in writing, especially in your creative essay, transactional pieces, or literature essays. So how do we change your sentence should you wish to keep this word? Right, so on the next slide, I'm going to show you, but let me quickly just run through these split infinitives. She played her flute to gracefully entertain. This holiday is a great time to finally go. Sounds pretty familiar, we speak like that. She only wants to hastily talk to her friends. We ordered sushi to liberally share with our friends. The rain ruined my plan to carefully tend to the garden. I am definitely guilty of some of these. Now let's learn how to fix it. Have a look at these answers. This is how we change the sentence to ensure that the infinitive is not split. Do not move the descriptive word closer to the infinitive, as it will then relate to the finite verb and not qualify the infinitive verb. Ensure that you read the sentence after writing it down to ensure that it still, of course, makes sense. Tandeka played her flute to entertain the class gracefully, and then it relates to the entertaining part. If I moved it closer, for example, Tandeka gracefully played, it would qualify the finite verb played, and therefore it has to be in a different place. This holiday is a great time to go to the beach, finally. She only wants to talk to her friend hastily. Makes pretty much sense at the end of the sentence there. We ordered sushi to share how liberally, right? And then becomes an adverb there. The rain ruined my plan to tend the garden carefully. Right, makes sense. It seems like most of the times you could move it more or less to the end of the sentence or after my infinitive. In some cases, you can place it in front of, but it's all about the meaning. Don't change the meaning of the sentence when moving your descriptive word. Alrighty, now we move into another error that occurs more than we'd like to. A comma splice. I know it's a funky word, right? Is an error that occurs when our main clause, or just a simple sentence, is joined to another main clause, another simple sentence, but we accidentally choose a comma. This is an error. We don't join sentences with commas. What do we join them with? Ha, that's correct. We join them with coordinating conjunctions. Yes, and for those of you who don't know, the fanboy acronym we can use there to remember what are our coordinating conjunctions. And by the way, when we are dissecting sentences and you have to state why it is a compound sentence or a complex sentence, you could give that as a reason because it has a coordinating conjunction and it will contain two finite verbs. Now, in order to correct this error, you must be able to do two things first. Number one, identify the finite verb. I think that's basic with all your language sentences. Remember that when you're busy working with your sentences. Identify the finite verb because everything stems from there. And the second thing is, notice the main clauses, independent sentences. If there are two separate full ideas, then the use of a comma is a grammatical error. And this can also occur when we have subordinate clauses that are not in independent sentences, because every subordinating conjunction will have a different punctuation mark that is added to it. So remember that. Make sure you know your spelling rules. Make sure you know your punctuation usage so that you can use it effectively. All right, now first have a look at the sentences. Let's look at number one. He won the game, we lost the tournament. Now, when we look at the first sentence that is highlighted there in a nice pinkish color for you, notice that first the main verb is won. We call that the finite verb. We won the game. It's a full idea, full concept. It's a simple, basic sentence. When we look at the part that comes after the comma, we lost the tournament. Now, even though it's in lowercase, even though it comes after a comma, it doesn't mean it's not a sentence. In fact, let's have a look. We lost the tournament. If I just read that on its own, would you agree with me that it makes complete sense, it can stand on its own, and I've underlined the word lost, which in fact is a finite verb. So what we have in that first sentence is exactly what we've been talking about. We have a main clause, finite verb, and a full idea, plus another main clause, full idea, finite verb. But accidentally, we've placed a comma in the middle. This is a big error. What did we need to place? Yes, that's correct, a coordinating conjunction. And very often when we double up in the next main clause, some of our words can fall away. I'll show you how that works on the next slide. The teacher is carrying many bags. Someone should help her. Now look at the purple part. The teacher is carrying many bags. That is a full idea. What is our finite verb? Now this one is a little bit tricky because we have a combination of two non-finite verbs. We have is, which can be a linking verb, but in this case it's not. In this instance, it's an auxiliary verb. And we've married that or joined it with a present participle. Now the combination of an auxiliary verb, aka a helping verb, it helps a non-finite verb to become, that's it, a finite verb. So in that sentence, my non-finite verbs actually create a finite verb. So is carrying, as I've underlined there, is my finite verb. So full idea, the teacher is carrying many bags. Next idea, someone should help her. The word should is of course a linking verb there, and therefore it is a full idea. Most head girls, next one, spend more than 60% of their time at their school. Right? Full idea. Most head girls spend, let's leave out all the fluff, spend most of their time at school. All right, do you see? We can even change it if we want to figure out what's going on here. Next part. They spend their time attending meetings, overseeing, implementing of duties, and delivering speeches. Bunch of verbs there, but the main one is spend. Full idea, can stand on its own, and so the sentences continue. And you'll notice each time I've underlined the verbs for you simply because I wanted you to notice that there are finite verbs in each part of the sentence. And when it occurs twice, where we have a finite verb twice, very often there are two main clauses. We have to follow the logistical and grammatical rules of the language to ensure that we are successful here. Now, let's see how this works. Okay, now let's fix number one. Firstly, we need to add a conjunction, but not just any conjunction. I have two main clauses, therefore I need to add a coordinating conjunction. In this instance, I definitely feel that the word but is important to use. We won the game, but lost the tournament. Now, why have I placed the word we in brackets? Do you remember in the previous slide I mentioned that if there's a double up of words, that doesn't change the meaning of the sentence. We can leave it out. All right, so in this case, the we is both applicable to won the game and lost the tournament. So we don't have to repeat ourselves there. There's nothing wrong if you do, but it's just better use of the language when we leave that out. Now let's look at number two, second option to maybe change the way that we work with our sentences, and this is to add a semicolon. But I want to put in a big disclaimer here. Please, please, please ensure that you only use a semicolon when it makes a logical connection, the one sentence to the other. Otherwise, you're going to use this and overuse it, and it's going to be incorrect. Fix number one is your go-to for all your main clauses as far as possible. But let me show you how we can change this. Remember that one about the unicorn? The ogre caught the unicorn, first main clause. Semicolon. Remember, the function of a semicolon is to lead in an explanation. So let's see if it explains. The terrible ogre then took the terrified beast to the dark mountains. We could have added an and if we used fix number 1, but this one makes sense. Very, very important is that nota bene there at the bottom. Please make sure that you do read through it. Now, the last option is the one for when you're really desperate. You don't know how to fix the sentence. It's a comma splice and it's just a disaster. You are tired and you just decide, you know what? Let me just separate the sentences. This is, I think, the safest route to follow is to split your two sentences. So if you're unsure, rather make it shorter sentences. And what happens in your final exam is when we are marking this, we would afford actually more marks to someone that has shorter sentences, but they are accurate, rather than someone that has elaborate sentences. And after a while, it is such a mess that you lose the meaning of what you're trying to say. So do yourself a favor, read your sentences. If there are too many ands and buts and so on, rather separate them by making them 2 or 3 or 5 or how many ever sentences. The rule of thumb is always, you can use more than one coordinating conjunction. For example, the word and, but its function must be different. So if I'm using and as a joining word between two concepts, like fish and chips, and later on I use an and to join two main clauses, that's two separate functions. Then it is fine to use more than one conjunction. But as a rule, or just a guideline, try to not use your coordinating conjunctions so much that your sentence actually becomes a bit floppy. No one wants to read a sentence that's an entire paragraph long, and also it is grammatically incorrect to write that way. Right, so ensure that you do not make such a horrible error as a comma splice, because it is really difficult to then read and assess your work. All right, now we get to Concord errors. No, I'm not talking about the plane. I wish sometimes. But in grammar, a Concord error refers to the way that a word has a form appropriate to the number or gender of the noun, pronoun it relates to. In other words, we call that the verb-noun agreement. My single noun must agree with a single verb. In other words, I can't say, I are going to the park. That is incorrect. We can even hear it. We have to use the correct verb or form of the verb, whether it's plural or singular, to fit with whatever my subject is. For example, in she hates it, there is concord between the single form of the verb and the plural pronoun, single pronoun she. If the subject is plural, in other words more than one, the verb must reflect it by also being plural. Singular subjects must be followed by a singular verb, but it is not that simple. So let's lay out all the rules that you need to look at before you are able to identify this error. Now, just have a look there on my screen. At the example, I said Suzanne, one person, is one singular verb, very happy. Oh dear. So Suzanne is very happy. We can't say Suzanne are very happy. Right. But it changes when we have a plural subject. For example, Suzanne and Paul. Those are two people. If I replace Suzanne and Paul and I make it they, it's easier to then figure out. They are very happy. We can't say they is very happy. So it won't be Suzanne and Paul is very happy. It must be an are. But that's not all. So let's have a look at the next. Now, if a subordinate clause comes between the subject and the verb, it does not change the agreement. Now, what does that mean? It means that if I start a sentence like the woman, right? That's my subject. That is what the sentence is about. And I add detail in. You'll see I've used parentheses or additional information between commas. Who is dancing up and down the hall? That's my extra information. If I leave it out, my sentence will still make sense. then the verb that follows after that is still part of my main clause, and therefore it is singular. Is very pretty. Now let me break it down again. If I leave out the parenthesis, the additional information, the thing that doesn't change the sentence necessarily, who is dancing up and down the hall, if I leave it out and I just keep my sentence simple, it will sound like this. The woman is very pretty. Do you see? So always make sure that you look for the subject or the noun or pronoun that fits with my verb. Right, if there is a phrase between the subject and the verb, it will usually not change their agreement. Have a look again. The cakes. How many cakes? Many cakes, right? Which are covered in freshly made icing. Ha! Do you see? We've even had one there. Look lovely today. The cakes look lovely today. Now, sometimes what might help you to remember this is when I have a noun that has a plural, very often they end with an S. My verb very often would not have an S. And I'm not talking about is and are, I'm talking about all the other regular verbs like look. The cake looks. The cakes look. Right, so add the S, drop the S. If my noun or my pronoun has the S, I drop it at the verb, and the other way around. If my noun does not have the S, I have to add it at my verb. Right, and it's an easy way to remember how to get them to agree. Now have a look at the second one I was talking about. The look, noun, of this hamburger, extra information, is very peculiar. If I say the look of these hamburgers is very peculiar, what do you think? Yes? No? If I just said the look is very peculiar, it would make sense, right? But remember, we have to take everything into account there. The shows in the Theatre of London, shows, plural, were very elaborate. Do you see? Right, let's go to the next slide. Now, when the subject of the sentence is composed of two or more nouns or pronouns connected by and, you will normally use plural verb. Now, have a look there. Tandeka and her squad. Yes, a squad could be one whole concept, but because we've added Tandeka separately, it makes it two different things now. And therefore, if I say Tandeka and her squad, we could maybe use they are, not they is. Tandeka and her squad are performing. The computer, the mouse, and all the keyboards are broken. As soon as we use that and to join a list, it becomes a plural. However, if the compound subject refers to the same thing, then the verb will be singular. For example, chicken and rice, one dish, right, is my brother's most hated meal. Consistency and diligence, right, more or less the same thing, is the key to success. I could replace that with it is my brother's most hated meal. It is the key to success. Right. And very often, if you look at large groups like the class, yes, there are many people in the class, but a class constitutes one thing. Therefore, I would say the class is making a noise, not are making a noise. But if I change it slightly and I say the class members, members plural, are making a noise, then it is different, right? So it's very important that you read and understand what is going on in your sentence, because that will make you successful with Concord. Now, who thought Concord had so many rules? So let's plow through number 5. Now, if the noun that make up a subject are singular and connected by the words or, nor, either or not only, but also, then the verb is singular. For example, neither Amy nor Julian. Now, let's just look at it separately. If we don't have the word neither and we just say Amy is coming to class, Julian is coming to class, or Amy is not coming to class, Julian is not coming to class. Do you see why we could use the singular form there? The same with winning or losing. Because we have an option, it's either or, and therefore it's singular. Is largely based on your level of commitment. Ha, that is very true. Number 6, if a subject, in other words, the main thing of the sentence, consists of both singular and plural nouns, it is the noun or the pronoun that is closest to the verb that determines if the verb is in fact plural or singular. We call this the rule of proximity. How close is it in proximity? Let's have a look. My wife or my animals greet me at the window. If I had swapped that around, it would sound differently. My animals or my wife greets. Do you see? Haha! Because there's no S, I have to add it when it's singular. Neither my work friends nor my mother singular, knows my secret. If I'd swapped it around, neither my mother nor my work friends know my secret. Got it? Sounds good to me. Now, even though there are a few more rules, let's look at one final rule that you must consider on the next slide. And finally, the verb is singular if the subject is an indefinite pronoun that ends in anybody, one, or thing. For example, anybody, anyone, anything, everybody, everyone, everything, nobody, no one, nobody, someone. This is where it will stay singular. The way I remember it is the end of that word is either a one or a body. A body to me is always one thing, hopefully. So the subject ending on those things will sound like this. Nobody has arrived, not nobody have arrived. Everyone is passing the beggar, right? Not everyone are. Got it? Right, let's go to the final idea here. Right, because I know that sometimes we need some additional help. Here are some worksheets that you can have a look at online. They really help to just embed the information that you've learned here. So have a look at those. And of course, if you want to go look up some of the information and see all the things that I've used to create my work, except with my knowledge of teaching, have a look at these blogs. They've really helped some of my learners. Right, that's all for now, lovelies. I hope you've learned something and that you can apply the knowledge of these errors that we continuously make in our writing and our language papers, and that you become successful in using and wielding this language. Thank you for watching, and remember to look at our next videos on our Tikkies website. And also remember to go and view the booklets because they have additional information and worksheets that you can work through. Best of luck. See you again. Bye.